Elden Ring is undoubtedly an amazing game, and I don't think I need to explain why, primarily because there's at least 1,000 videos on YouTube doing exactly that. And considering I've played through the game 6 times, beaten it 4 times, and gotten the Platinum Trophy on PlayStation, at this point I know Elden Ring inside and out. So I figured, why don't I make a video about all the things I don't like about the game? Surely everyone on the internet loves to see Dark Souls games get criticized, right?
Let's just jump into it.
Elden Ring does borrow a lot from the Souls games, and that includes the stingy-ass upgrade system. It's pretty exciting on your first playthrough when you upgrade your weapon for the first time, feeling so much stronger than you were, only to be doused in a heaping tablespoon of reality. You need every edge you can get in the late game, and that means upgrading your weapon as high as you can get. Because if you've been hoarding all your smithing stones and you face the fire giant with a base heavy greatsword, you're gonna have a bad time. Problem with this arises from the fact that there's an absolute metric fuckton of weapons in the game. 308 to be exact, each with different stats and moves and scaling, and most importantly, style. With all these weapons sprinkled throughout the map, there's undoubtedly at least one that speaks to you. Unless you're one of those people that plans out their entire build before you even start the game, there's almost no way to stick with one weapon for the entire game. Especially if it's your first playthrough and you want to experiment and try out new stuff. But you can't, because you already spent all your smithing stones on a different weapon that you decided you didn't like anymore. Oh, that's fine, I'll just go into a cave and get more.
3 hours later.
4 smithing stone 5s, and I need somber smithing stone 6s. Shit. Well, guess I'll just go hunting for smithing stone bell bearings so I can just buy the smithing stone. And it's all the way in the late game. Well, shit. Guess I'm sticking with you for now. Yippee! You know, Monster Hunter World had a really neat system where you could return your weapon back to its base stats and get your upgrade materials back. You know, that way you weren't ever stuck with one weapon and you could try out all the different weapon types the game had. And that game only had 14 weapon types. Elden Ring has 31. I understand that having smithing stones hard to get motivates the player to get out into the world and explore so they can find more, but it doesn't even do that right. Most of the different tiers of smithing stone are in a specific cave on different corners of the map, and if you don't already know where to find them, good fucking luck, pal. The game does that kind of a lot, peppering the map with all kinds of different materials and tools and upgrades to get the player to go out and look for them. Seeing that it's an open world game, this makes a lot of sense to do. The only problem with that is that most of the things you find are absolutely not worth the time it took to get them. Which brings me to these things. I call them glovewort dungeons, maybe the game calls them something different, but that's what I call them. And I hate them. There are small dungeons littered throughout the map, and they're completely optional, but if you do decide to enter them, you will find that almost all of them are fucking identical. Seriously, you enter one and fight an army of skeletons, sometimes imps, sometimes rats, sometimes all three, and after slogging through enemy traps and identical hallways, you go to the other end, pull a lever, fight a boss, and leave. Now, in any other open world game, this would be the highlight, but here it's just so repetitive and uninspired compared to the rest of the game.
I'm joking!
They aren't all bad, some of them actually introduce new mechanics and even offer really cool lore about the game. And most of the bosses are really fun, and even then they're just reskins of previous bosses, but by far the biggest flaw is just that there's simply no reason to go in them in the first place. Really, unless you're gathering glovewort or hunting for a specific weapon to complete your build, there's absolutely no reason to enter these. I'll go out on a limb and say nobody ever thinks to themselves, oh boy, 13 hallways of skeletons and traps, my favorite. The only fun part of these are the boss fights at the very end, and what do you get for beating these bosses? Fucking spirit ashes.
That's okay, you can keep it.
There are 64 of these things in the game, and every single one of them is pointless. Maybe if you haven't beaten Radon yet and you don't have access to the Mimic tier, then sure, yeah, these things could actually serve a purpose. But once you have the Mimic tier, you're completely handicapping yourself by using any other Spirit Ash. I don't even think that's a hot take, there's just seriously no competition between these things. Which bleeds into a bigger problem this game has, the balancing. When most people talk about balancing in Elden Ring, they tend to bring up weapons and enemy damage, but there are some things in this game that have been fundamentally broken from day one. For example, the Great Runes. There's only 7 of these in the game, and you get them from defeating major bosses, but they might as well not exist because the objectively best one is obtained in the beginning of the game after you kill the weakest demigod. The rest of the Great Runes that you get become more and more useless until you get to Malenia's Great Rune, which is actually a nerf to your health regen. Seriously, there's just no argument you could make for any of these. Rykard's would actually be really useful if there wasn't a talisman that did the exact same thing. Radon's Great Rune is literally a worse version of Godric's. You would expect that in a combat sandbox like Elden Ring there would be so much more attention paid to the balancing. Remember finding Elden stars in the deep root depths thinking that it would be the best spell in the game only to find out that it was absolutely useless besides looking cool? Side note, why don't any of the spells have visible stats? Like they tell you what they scale off of and the mana cost, but not how much damage they do or casting time or anything. I don't know about you guys, but for me, playing mage characters is so annoying because I find a new spell that looks cool and I'm like, oh, is this better than the one I have equipped? Who fucking knows? Better go out and painstakingly cast every spell I have on some skeletons to figure out which one does the most damage. This shit feels like doing taxes. Double side note, if you're one of those people that stands on a bridge and spams those bullshit dragon breath spells, fuck you. You can suck every inch of my player versus player combat. Depending on who you ask, it's either the best or worst part of the game. And if I can sound like a boomer for a moment, I actually really miss Dark Souls PvP. Back in the good old days when magic was a total joke, backstabbing people from 30 feet away was the meta, and the only deciding factors of victory were skill, cunning, and who had the worst internet connection. Nowadays, Elden Ring PvP feels like walking into a school shooting at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Douchebaggery. Everyone just spams weapon arts and spells. And these people are dedicated to this shit. I've seen some of those videos of people making overpowered builds for PvP, and every time it's just setting up 13 different buffs to spam the same broken weapon art. Like, I almost have to respect the people that come up with this stuff. Like, I always just make my builds around what I find interesting. I can't imagine the thought process behind tailoring every single stat and piece of gear to one specific move. What's funny is that those players end up being the deciding factors in the Thea boss fight. Like, maybe you'll get someone using Rivers of Blood without a single level spent on Arcane, or someone whose entire build is made around that one Scarlet Rot Dragon spell. This was already my least favorite questline, and then they give me this shit. Speaking of questlines, Elden Ring's questlines make me want to die. They aren't bad or poorly written or anything, they're just stupid as hell when it comes to the way you're supposed to follow them. Dark Souls has always been very vague and cryptic with their storytelling, but I'm convinced FromSoft just doesn't want people to complete these storylines. I said before in my vampire video that I hate using the internet to guide me through games, and I prefer to figure them out myself, so naturally on my first playthrough of Elden Ring, I didn't complete a single questline. Rather than explain to you why they're so dogshit, allow me to summarize one of the questlines in the game so you can see what I'm talking about. First things first, go talk to this soy boy in Round Table Hold, exhaust his dialogue, and leave him to stand around for the next 20 hours. Once you've gotten to the Altus Plateau, fast travel back to the Round Table Hold, talk to him again, and he'll leave to go find some homeless guy. Now you need to fast travel back to the Altus Plateau and proceed to the middle of fucking nowhere to find him. He can be found right at the intersection of absolutely nowhere. Talk to him and gain no information whatsoever. Now go find the hobo who's even deeper in the middle of goddamn nowhere. Once you find him, talk to him and he will say nothing at all. Now go back to Slim Shady and tell him that you found the location of the homeless man. Now travel back to the homeless guy and you will find both of them docking with each other. Talk to Eminem again and learn absolutely nothing. Then forget about them for the next 5 hours until you get to Lanedell. Then find them right next to the Elden Ring bodybuilder competition. Talk to them again and remind yourself how fucking annoying they are. Then proceed to wander around the city until you find this statue of Radagon. Cool statue, right? Turns out this statue is incredibly important to the lore. To reveal the truth, you have to use this spell in front of the statue. A spell that you would never use in this spot and would have absolutely no clue has anything to do with the statue. Once you use it though, it will reveal that Radagon is a crossdresser. Woo, big reveal. Now that you've properly ascertained Radagon's cup size, travel back to Dream and Tommy Innit to get a big heaping load of useless information. Forget that they exist for an additional 3 hours until you get here, the mountaintops of the giants, where the hobo will be doing the same shit he's been doing for the entire game, and Marshall Mathers will be having a mental breakdown because of it. Talk to them to convince them not to stand in the frozen Skyrim tundra completely naked. They obviously won't listen, so now you need to burn down the Erd Tree, causing them to return to Lanedell to investigate because they don't know what fire is. You can talk to B Rabbit one last time to hear his final exposition dump of useless knowledge, before he kills himself out of embarrassment. Now, after all that, you can get this item, which gives you the ending of whatever the fuck. Oh geez, that sounded like a bunch of backtracking and random bullshit that had nothing to do with anything. Correct! And every questline is like this. Go to a bunch of arbitrary locations and do very specific actions in the very correct order, or else the character you're doing the quest for will die. I'm not saying I want the game to hold my hand, but stop to consider why the most popular ending to the game just so happens to be the one that explicitly tells you where to go and what to do in order to get it. Anyway, though, the point I've been trying to make with this video is that Dark Souls 2 is the best Souls game.
What the fuck?